Have you ever heard about the cursed forests of the United States? Not the ones that appear in tourist brochures, but those that keep secrets buried under the damp leaves, where trails disappear, compasses go crazy, and those who enter do not always return in one piece. The 5 stories you will hear tonight are not fabrications. They were sent as real stories, coming from ordinary people who ventured into forgotten places. They don't know each other. They live in different states. But there is something silent, that connects all these testimonies. One whisper coming from the trees, a call that echoes even after the silence, a kind of darkness that doesn't need to be seen, just felt. So if you decide to keep listening, prepare for doubt everything you know about safety, logic, and reality. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and listen carefully to every word, every silence, every nervous breath captured in this audio. Why some forests observe, and tonight, they're listening too. If you enjoyed these stories, click the link below and discover even deeper horrors in our exclusive ebook. I never entered a forest again after that night, not even a park, an orchard. Even the sound of leaves rustling in the wind makes me panic, but I still hear it. In the silence of the early morning, when I'm alone, I could swear he's calling me, because some echoes don't come from our voices. They come from something that was there before us and will continue after us. Mount Hood, Oregon, September 2017. It all started with a solitary walk. I needed to escape the city for a few days. The pressure at work was unbearable, and my anxiety was worsening with insomnia, rapid heartbeat, and paranoia. A friend recommended that I spend a weekend on Mount Hood, alone, with just my tent, my backpack, and the sounds of nature. I followed the advice. I arrived on a Friday afternoon. The sky was overcast, and the air smelled of wet pine. I chose a secluded trail, less traveled by tourists. I wanted total seclusion. The first night was peaceful. Light rain, light wind, absolute peace. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. I woke up on Saturday with the feeling that I was being watched. At first I thought it was my mind playing tricks, urban paranoia perhaps. But there was something different about that silence. A thick silence, as if the sound were muffled by the forest. No birds, no insects, nothing. I explored a smaller, poorly marked trail that led south. I brought a compass and my GPS, even though the signal was intermittent. I hiked for over an hour until I reached a clearing. That's where I found the pile of rocks. It wasn't natural. Someone had stacked those rocks, 7 in all, with obsessive care. At the base, a small feather stuck between 2 stones. I touched it, curious. The instant my fingers touched the top stone, I heard a dull sound of footsteps behind me. I turned quickly. Nobody. The forest remained silent. I immediately returned to camp, a little nervous. When I arrived, I noticed someone had tampered with my tent. Nothing was stolen, but my sleeping bag was open, and my water bottle was overturned, as if someone had come in and gone out, leaving everything almost the same. At night, when the rain began to thicken, I heard a sound coming from the forest. It sounded like a voice, low, slurred. At first I thought it was an animal, or my tired mind, but no, it was my own voice, a distorted recording of something I had said hours earlier. Maybe I need this to clear my head. The phrase I muttered that afternoon, alone, while cooking. But now, it came from inside the forest, in a loop. Maybe I need this. Clear. The head. A broken echo, a distorted whisper. The sound came and went, like the swaying of the wind, but there was no wind. On Sunday, I tried to leave early. The compass kept spinning on its own. The GPS showed my location as unavailable. The trail back was different. It was as if I'd never been there. The markings were gone. I started walking in circles, 3 times I returned to the same pile of rocks, though I had gone in opposite directions. The 4th time, the pile had 8 stones, and a drop of blood on the feather. I screamed. I ran aimlessly for almost an hour, until my legs gave out. I fell to the damp ground, breathing heavily, shaking. That's when I heard my own scream, coming from the middle of the forest. But this time, there was something mixed in the voice. Another voice, deeper, older, speaking together, in unison, as if something were inside me. That night, I set up makeshift camp. No tent, no fire. In the dark, I heard footsteps around. Regular, precise, like a barefoot man walking slowly among branches. But he never came close. He never ran away. Just surrounded. 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 And then, at 3:27 in the morning, I saw him, between 2 trees, a very tall man, completely still, watching. No face. Or maybe with a face covered in moss, leaves, or shadows. I don't know. He didn't move. Me either. We stared at each other for minutes, until he slowly raised an arm and pointed behind me. I didn't turn around. I closed my eyes, and there I stayed, until the day breaks. When the sun came up, the forest looked different, noisy, alive, with birds, wind, leaves, everything back. The markings were there again. I staggered off the trail. I found my car. I drove on without looking back, but since that day, I listen, even at home, at work, on rainy days. I listen, my voice, distorted, whispering between walls. Maybe I need this. Clear, the head, and sometimes, in the mirror, I swear I see the figure of someone tall, standing behind me. If you think this is all just imagination, maybe you're right. But if you ever go into the woods on Mount Hood alone and hear your own voice coming from within the trees, don't answer. Have you ever felt like the world around you has changed, even without leaving your seat, as if the forest had taken a deep breath, and you, without realizing it, were inside it now? But not the same forest you entered. I was a trail guide. I'd hiked dozens of routes through the Appalachians. I knew every curve, every crooked tree, every smell. And yet, that night, it was the forest that guided me, and she took me where no one should tread. West Virginia, April 2019. I wasn't a beginner. I'd guided tourists, backpackers, and even film crews. But that week, the group canceled at the last minute. Still, I went alone to check out the terrain and enjoy a few days away from the city. The plan was simple: hike a secluded section of the Devil's Backbone Trail, an old and rarely used path, through a valley between 2 thickly overgrown cliffs. I arrived with everything I needed: water, supplies, GPS, radio, printed map, flashlight, knife, everything. But none of these things would help me in what was to come. On the second day of walking, I began to notice that the terrain was different. The trail seemed to go up where it had previously gone down. Curves changed. Trees marked by other groups were gone. Worse, the GPS froze. It showed I was standing still, but I was actually walking. The compass rotated from time to time, as if something around it was interfering with the magnetic field. And then I heard a muffled scream coming from the valley ahead. A sound, too human to ignore. I shouted back, "Hello, do you need help?" Silence. Seconds later, the scream came again. But this time, it was my own voice. "Hello, do you need help?" The same phrase, the same intonation, as if someone had recorded it, or repeated. My mind told me to leave, but my guiding instinct pushed me forward. If someone was hurt, I couldn't ignore it. I walked down the valley. The brush thickened. The further I walked, the more the world around me seemed to shrink, until I found the sign. She was old, covered in moss, nailed to a dead tree trunk. Her wail closed. access prohibited since 1971. There was no mention of this area on the map I carried, no signs, no recorded routes, but just below, someone had stabbed a knife into the wood, holding a piece of cloth, soaked in dried blood. I should have gone back, but I continued. The forest grew thicker and thicker, and the feeling that I was being watched grew with every step. Sounds rustled through the branches as if children were laughing in the woods, but always too far away. And at the same time, too close, I saw amulets hanging from trees, small bones, feathers. On one of them, there was something carved in low relief. 3 words, "Where she waits, where she waits." I should have gone back. Night fell before I knew it. The sky suddenly darkened, as if someone had turned off the world. I couldn't set up a tent. All I did was crouch down near a rock and wait for time to pass. But she arrived before dawn. First came the sounds, wet footsteps on leaves, but not from an animal. They came and went, as if someone approached, stopped, and disappeared. Then, around 4 a.m., I saw eyes glowing in the dark. Too tall to be a common animal, they moved slowly through the trees, always keeping their distance. But with each passing minute, they seemed closer, and around them, everything fell silent. Not wind, not rain, not my own heart. Just those eyes, observing, waiting. When the light came back on, I tried to retrace my steps, but everything had changed. The trail I came on no longer existed. The sign was gone. The valley was different. I started walking in circles. The radio wasn't working. My watch had stopped. Time stopped. Finally, I gave up. I sat down near a thick root and closed my eyes. Surrendered. It was then that I heard breathing behind me. Slow, deep, almost maternal. I felt a hand land on my shoulder. Free. Osuda. But instead of screaming, I slept. I was lying on the side of a road. My backpack was beside me, untouched. My documents, untouched. But my shirt was ripped, and there were deep nail marks on my neck. A truck driver met me there, confused. He said the area had been closed for years due to landslide risk. I showed the way from where I came. There was no trail. There was no valley. There was no sign. The forest hides its portals when it no longer wants to play. I went back to guiding people, but never alone again. Never near that region again. Sometimes, on distant trails, I hear someone calling my name through the trees. I don't know if it's my mind or if she's still waiting. If you enjoyed this story, click the link below and discover even deeper horrors in our exclusive ebook. There are things in the woods that don't care what you believe. Spirits, entities, guardians, or just the earth itself waking up to look you in the eye. In the Black Hills, the name doesn't matter. It only matters if you are seen. And I went, South Dakota, June 2021. I'm a geologist. I work with topography and land assessment for environmental projects. So I spend a lot of time alone in the field, mapping soil, collecting samples, and traveling through places no one has set foot in for years. It was on one of these missions that I was sent to the Black Hills, a dense region with ancient rock formations and dense forest. A place that, according to the Lakota, holds spiritual forces that should not be disturbed. But that never worried me. Until that summer, I camped in a remote area of the region with no trail access. Everything was done based on coordinates and compasses, and my GPS hit, of course. My job was to measure soil density at specific points. It all started well. But on the second day, after collecting data in a particularly isolated area, I began to feel like something was following me. At first, I thought it was just the pressure, the heat, the loneliness. But there were strange marks on the ground, bare human footprints, too big. Branches broke in a straight line, as if someone was surrounding me. And a sound, low, distant, like wood being dragged against rock. But I saw no one, just trees. ever more crooked. It was at the end of the third day that I noticed a pattern. The trees were turned. Many of them grew with their trunks crooked, all in the same direction, as if they were forced to grow facing a point in the center of the forest. When I measured the ground in that direction, the device simply turned off. No battery, no explanation. Then I noticed that the animals were gone. No insects, no birds, not even mosquitoes. Absolute silence. But still, I felt watched. On the fourth day, while aimlessly walking around looking for a good collecting spot, I came across a perfect circle of black stones in the middle of a clearing. In the center was a totem pole made of bones and roots, tied together with faded red threads. It wasn't on the map. It wasn't indigenous, at least not according to what I knew of the local culture. I touched one of the stones. The ground shook. I swear to God, it was like a dull roar rose from the earth, vibrating through my bones. I ran like never before. I returned to camp, packed my bags and decided to leave the next day. But that night was the worst of my life. Around 2 m.o., I heard something crawling through the forest. No steps, something very heavy, very tall. When I looked through the tent canvas, between the trees, I saw something gigantic, humanoid, made of wood, leaves, and bones, as if the forest itself had risen up. He didn't move like a living being. He was like a puppet trapped in invisible winds. His eyes, 2 dark circles, gleamed dully, and wherever he passed, the trees bent. The creature turned its head awkwardly, as if sniffing the air, until it stops and looks straight at me. I stood still, trembling. In absolute silence, he started walking towards me. Each step made the ground vibrate. When he got within a few meters, he stopped. He bent down, like a mountain curving its top. And then, he whispered, but not with voice, with the sound of the trees, as if 1,000 leaves were trembling in unison, forming words in my mind. You stepped where you shouldn't have. What has been taken will be returned. The soil is hungry. That's when my vision went black, and I deleted it. I woke up in the morning naked, lying on a hot stone. My clothes were folded to the side. My equipment was piled up, all broken. The stone circle was gone, but all around me, dozens of trees were facing me, as if I were the new central point. I got back on the road in a state of shock. I was treated at a hospital, where they said I was dehydrated and confused, but I know what I saw, and he's still there. Since then, my body has transformed. Sometimes, during the night, my eyes open by themselves, and I hear roots crawling under my room, as if the forest was coming to get me. Reflecting pools. That's what they call the shallow, calm pools that form in the Everglades swamps. They are clear, almost beautiful, reflecting the twisted trees, the dark clouds, the overcast sky. But no one tells you that sometimes these mirrors show things that aren't there, things that should be dead, or worse, alive, but trapped somewhere else. Florida, August 2020. I volunteered for an environmental NGO that monitors the Everglades ecosystem. I was already in my 2nd month of fieldwork when my boss asked me to do a round alone in a remote sector. There's just water and weeds, nothing special, she said. I went by kayak as usual, with GPS equipment, a monitoring camera, and an old radio. The sun barely peeked out from behind the heavy clouds. The air was dense, humid, and heavy. At 2:03 p.m., I arrived in an area they called Alligator's Back, a remote stretch where the ground forms narrow channels between cypress-covered islets. There, I found the first body of water. It looked like liquid glass. No waves, no movement, but the reflection didn't match the real landscape. In the reflection, one of the trees was crooked, almost fallen. But when you looked at her directly, really, she was straight, healthy. I frowned. I tilted my head, and the reflection moved on its own. The crooked tree turned its top toward me, as if he was looking at me. I looked around. No breeze, no movement. The sound of frogs and insects had completely stopped. The radio let out a dry crackle. Then, a strange interference, as if someone were whispering softly. I couldn't understand the words. I kept rowing, but my body was already shaking. I passed 3 more bodies of water in a row. In each, the reflection showed some unsettling distortion. A canoe tied to the shore, but there was none. A human figure from behind, crouching over the water. A white figure, floating among the cypresses. Every time I looked directly, there was nothing. But the reflection persisted. It followed me, until I started seeing myself reflected in the wrong way. My reflection didn't blink when I blinked. He breathed slowly when I held my breath. He smiled at me, and I wasn't smiling. At the last bend in the canal, I saw the reflection of a suspension bridge, but there was no bridge there. Nothing but water and vegetation. I tried to row back. The kayak capsized on its own. I felt as if something were pulling my hand into the water, thin fingers, cold as ice. I struggled. I screamed. I swallowed dark water. I managed to emerge and crawl to a root. It was then that, for the first time, I saw something outside the reflection. A white, female figure floating a few meters away from me. Wet dress, hair covering her face, feet not touching the ground. She didn't move, but the water around it began to boil. I fainted. I woke up to clear skies and the radio beeping frantically. 18 hours had passed, but it felt like I had blacked out for a few minutes. My skin was wrinkled as if it had been underwater for days. My backpack floated a few meters away, wet, but with everything inside, except the clock. It didn't work anymore. I returned with difficulty, paddling slowly, as if the water were heavier. As I looked into the last pool of water, the reflection showed my face, but with eyes as black as wells, and the skin rotten. Since then, the doctors said it was heat stroke or a panic attack. But what haunts me is not what I felt. That's what I've seen ever since. Wrong reflexes, faces that are not mine, smiles that appear when there shouldn't be any. And every night when I dream, I'm rowing, always coming back to that mirror, where I'm still sinking. Some forests forget who enters, others never forget, and there are those that don't let you forget about them. In 2016, I checked into a cabin in the Adirondacks, and I swear, the cabin got inside me. New York, October 2016. I'm a writer, or was. I was going through a writer's block that had been going on for months. A friend lent me his property in the Adirondacks, secluded, without power, perfect for writing in peace. Cabin 29, he called. It has an old-fashioned charm and an air of mystery. I went without a second thought. I settled in on a freezing late afternoon, taking only the essentials: laptop and notebooks, flashlights, blankets. First impression, the cabin looked too old to be standing, and the strange thing, the front door had 3 locks on the inside. Within the first few hours, I realized that the surrounding forest was oppressive, not loud, just too alive, as if breathing in sync with the house. The first night I dreamed of a man standing outside the window, thin beard, soaked clothes, eyes white as frosted glass. I woke up gasping for breath, and I saw mud marks on the floor, coming from the door to my bed, but everything was locked, 3 times locked. I ignored it. I blamed it on stress. Until the second day, when I started writing, something was wrong. My hands typed sentences I hadn't planned, ideas that weren't mine, words I would never use, characters I never created, but I couldn't stop. It was like someone was dictating inside my head, until I noticed the protagonist of the story I was writing was locked in a cabin in the mountains, just like me, and he began to hear voices between the walls. On the third day, rummaging through a compartment under the floor, I found a diary. It belonged to a man named Elijah, dated 1954. In the last days of the notebook, he writes confused, frightened sentences. She lives in the walls. When we write, she wakes up. The cabin needs words to breathe. I am the final chapter. Then, silence. No signatures. No bodies found. Only a dark ink stain, or dried blood, covered the last page. In the early hours of the fourth day, I was awakened by a sound I couldn't identify. It was like paper being ripped inside the wall, followed by whispers. I went to the wooden wall of the room. I put my ear to it, and I heard someone crying, but it wasn't human crying. It was sharp, jagged, choking, like someone trapped inside a book being ripped apart page by page. I fled to the room. I locked all the locks. The wall slammed shut on its own, from the inside out. On the last day, already in a fit of rage, I tried to burn the notebook and my laptop, but the fire wouldn't catch. The wood in the fireplace refused to burn. The diary pages, it returned to the ground, intact. I ran out of the cabin with everything I had. I walked for hours on the trail until I finally found a group of Boy Scouts and asked for help. But when they tried to take me back to cabin 29, she was no longer there. My friend. He swore he never owned a cabin in the Adirondacks. He said he only gave me the address of a cottage to rent. When I returned to the site alone, after months, I found an empty clearing, with a pile of stones in the center. On top of the rocks was my burnt laptop, and beside him, a leather notebook with the words, "Written by you, lived by her." Since then, I have never been able to write anything original. Everything I type is already written. What about the walls of my room? They've been breathing louder lately. Now that you've heard the 5 stories, tell me, do you really believe these were just coincidences? That people from different places, at different times, recounted similar experiences with double voices, erratic reflections, disappearing trails, faceless entities, and all of this was a figment of their imagination? Or is there something bigger, older, rooted in the forest soil? Something that watches, waits, and calls. What these people found in the trees, in the swamps, in the mountains and clearings had no definite shape. He did not speak clearly, but it left marks, deep, invisible. And once you hear, that you see, there is no going back to how it was before. Maybe you felt this way too. An inexplicable chill on an empty trail. A sound coming from where there should be no sound. A reflection that seems to smile when you're not smiling. If you've ever felt this way, tell your story in the comments, because no one comes back the same from the forest. And if you want to delve even deeper into these unseen horrors, click the link below and access our exclusive ebook. There, other stories were collected. Even more obscure accounts that could not be told here. Leave your story in the comments. Have you ever experienced something like this? Like the video? Share it, and subscribe to the channel if you still have the courage. Click on the ebook link and discover what else is hidden between the pages.